Have you ever wondered what these icons are and what to do about them? Well, I'm about to tell you what firmware is and how to take full advantage of the bonuses it can give your character. Hey guys, it's Tweety Expert here, ready to tell you all about firmware in Borderlands 4. Now, you may have a bunch of items that have a lot of icons on them, and that's called firmware. It's what all of these icons are right here. What these are is that these are little gear sets that you can help combine together to help give you bonuses to your character. For example, if we look here, this is a Gadget Ahoy, and if you look all the way to the left and follow that specific icon, Gadget Ahoy is going to boost our ordnance cooldown duration by 15%. Now let's take a step back and look at these icons. Now firmware only drops on gear, so if you can look at my weapons, none of these have firmware icons. That's because it only drops on rep kits, ordinances, class mods, shields, and enhancements. Now let's take a look at the rep kit I have equipped now. It has a firmware called God Killer, which it says 1 out of 3 on it. So if you go to the left side, you can see I have 1 out of the 3 highlighted. God Killer helps me do damage to the big boys. And as you can see, the second and third lines of the firmware are not highlighted. Now if we put something on that has God Killer, as shown by the icon, like this class mod, now if we hover over it, it's going to say 2 out of 3. So if we go back over, now we have damage taken from the big boys is reduced by 10%. We can go one further and equip another of those, like on our shield here. And now we have the maximum bonus that this firmware can give to us. You have 5 different items that it can roll on, of course. And you can be in 5 different firmware bonuses if you want the first line of each of them. You can mix and match between all 5 of them being equipped. My God Killer is at 3 of 3, but I can always go into something else if I would like to. So I can spec out of the rep kit and go into something like Gadget Ahoy. So I have 4 different things specced in. Something else I can change out of. Going into this, so I have 5 separate firmware bonuses. Katana wanted to pop in and say hi. Great yawn. So firmware only starts dropping at level 25 plus. So you don't have to have the story mission to a certain point, you just have to be level 25 in order to start equipping these things. Until you beat the story, you can't do anything with these icons except wear them, because there are ways to transfer them, which we'll get into in a different video, where you can use something called a firmware transfer machine, and there's a whole bunch of limitations on that, and that'll be something completely separate because there's a lot of rules that you need to follow in order to do such things. An easy way to find out if something is firmware when it's on the ground is if you kind of look for a sparkly beam. So this one, for example, has Atlas EX on it, while this one doesn't have any firmware on it regardless. So if you look for the specific beam in the loot piles, you can find things if you're trying to farm exactly for firmware. It's just an easy way to go through loot and sort through it faster. Now, firmware buffs are mostly for the endgame portion of Borderlands 4, when you're more clear on the specific damage types that you're doing. So for example, the get throwing is going to be ordnance damage and splash damage. So things like Tedior, if you have a huge Tedior build, you're going to probably want to get 3 out of 3 in get throwing. While God Killer is more of a generalized, little bit helpful in killing enemies type of thing that you can use throughout whatever build you're doing. Gadget Ahoy is going to be more of a generalized thing in helping your ordnance cooldown and damage that can be used throughout almost every character. There are specific firmware that is locked behind specific UVH levels, and those apply to the specific manufacturer firmware sets. For example, Get Throwing is one of those specific gear sets. On the Slippy, I have Trick Shot, which is also a UVHM locked firmware, and I'll put a list on screen with the confirmed firmware that is locked behind UVHM. This firmware you're going to want to keep an eye out more, especially if you're going for specific types of builds that are going to use these, as they are a more rare part of the firmware. And that's about it. Look at the loot beams to see if there's firmware on it. Make sure you take advantage of the different perks that you can have, and if you have something else that you want to get to the second line here, you go find another piece of gear that has Gadget Ahoy on it. Different combinations can benefit different people. Like this one is min-max for doing a bunch of damage to the big boys, and then you have extra splash damage and ordnance, but not taking advantage of Tedior and specifics. If the video is out now, I'll put it in the description, but there is a way to transfer this God Killer to something else. Isn't that right, Katana? So for example, you could take this God Killer and put it onto this rep kit, but there's a couple different rules that you have to follow in order to do such things. So that is going to be for another time. But regardless, that's all from me. And as always, tweet, tweet. See ya.